Welcome to a compilation of Pocket Kings from Tactical Tuesday episodes. Enjoy. As always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. John Chai. How you doing, sir?
Good as always. Excited to get started in this over pairs in the small blind episode. It's definitely one of the nodes that has a really big impact on your win rate because so much of your 3-betting range out of the small blind or from out of position is going to be over pairs, and the over pairs are definitely going to make up the biggest chunk of your win rate when you are 3-betting from out of position. So pretty important to get the spot right.
Yeah, I would say, over pairs are the biggest portion of your value range. 3-bet pot out of position is PFR, right? Like when you have value, typically it's an over pair. Like sometimes, you get like top pair, top kicker with ace, king, ace, queen, but you flop a lot of over pairs at this node. So pretty critical that you click all the right buttons and max value and get it right. So with all that said, we get a hijack open to $22.50, playing 5-10. Hero has king of clubs, king of hearts in the small blind. 3 bets to $105. Big blind folds. And the hijack calls. And here we are at a flop of 9-10-4. Rainbow, there's 220 in the pot. SPR is about 4-ish, a little bit more than 4.5. What do you think? Decision point numero uno.
So let me give you a little bit of context before we get super deep into this hand. This villain, who is raised from middle position and called the 3-bet, is described by the Wolf who submitted this hand as a very capable, very aggressive regular. And the second hand of this Tactical Tuesday episode is also going to be played by the same Wolf who plays her overpair very differently based on player profile. So we're going to be looking, as well as to go along with the overpairs, we're going to be looking at player-specific adjustments. And I think the Wolf did a really good job against both of these players. So just keep in mind that this player with 971 9 cents is an aggressive reg. That being said, I think you can have a lot of different strategies on this flop to get started. You can have a range 1/3 c-bet strategy. I think you could play bigger c-bets and, also have a checking range. I would imagine that this hand goes into the betting range regardless of which strategy you're playing.
Yeah, on 9-10-4, Rainbow probably going to start out with a third, maybe even a quarter, versus the player profile that you described. I think that there's, give them possibility for some downstream rope to over-aggress. So the Wolf does bet.
We're off to a good start to today's episode. The Wolf does pick Coach Brad's size. See if we can keep it up for more than one street. This is the best start that we've had so far, I think. So. Yeah,
maybe we can get, one of these days an immaculate hand where every action that they took is the ones that we suggest for Tactical Tuesday. I don't know. I'm not sure that it's possible, but we'll see. Tray of hearts on the turn, so 3, 4, 9, 10. Full rainbow board now, 393 in the pot. Hero's got 856. So I believe that I would probably check here against this specific player profile. But you could also bet, I think. You could bet and...
What's causing you to lean towards check?
Because I think that they're going to bet facing check at a pretty high frequency, right? Like I think a fairly aggressive player, they're going to be inclined to over-aggress with, a lot of their mergey type hands too, like 8, 7, 6s, 5s. And then ace 4, ace 3, potentially ace deuce, ace 5. They have a bunch of straight draws to pull from. So facing, a small bet, I'm probably check raising. Facing a big bet, I'm probably calling, would be sort of how I approach this spot with my kings. So yeah, like I think you could check, but I mean, you could bet, but it's going to be hard getting 3 streets, going bet, jam, and you don't get a chance to leverage our opponent's tendency to bet at a high frequency.
Yeah. And I think one thing that I'm noticing now and that I really like about the flop c-bet size is that facing 1/3 in position, I think a player profile of this type, the villain in this hand, is very likely to be the type of villain to obviously continue with all their straight draws facing a small size. I would expect everyone to continue with all their straight draws, but also continue with, 2 overs plus backdoor flush draw, right? So a hand like ace jack of clubs. I guess it also has a backdoor straight draw. So like 2 overs and double backdoors, like ace jack of clubs, ace jack of spades, ace jack of diamonds. And so
I think most people continue with those too, right?
Yeah, maybe I'm not being creative. Maybe there's like one that's even more like, maybe he calls like king 8 of diamonds pre-flop or something because he's,
I mean, like 6-7, 6-7's a gut shot. Maybe like 5-6, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Right.
Yeah.
Basically, what I'm saying is that I think when we use a small size on the flop versus these aggro regs, they're going to continue very wide and have a lot of hands that feel like they need to bluff once we check the turn, especially on the full rainbow turn. I think that they are going to have maybe more bets than checks because when they do turn a flush draw with hands that peel with a backdoor flush draw on the flop, like some of the time they're going to tell themselves that they don't want to put their equity at risk and find a check back. But I think that's less likely here on the full rainbow board texture. So I really like the small size on the flop even more now that we kind of talk about turn strategy.
You know what's interesting is that the more that we talked about the flop size, the more that I want to go back in time and say that we should just bet half on the flop instead of a third. I feel like, maybe I was primed too much given the profile-specific information, but if villain has a bunch of backdoors and overcards, a bunch of straight draws, a bunch of pairs on the flop, and very little hands that just don't connect with this board at all, then half pot actually seems to be superior than a third now that we spell out the turn. So, I don't know. Probably no immaculate hand because I probably... Now that if I could go back in time, knowing, the discussion that just went down, probably would prefer betting half than a third.
Well,
let's see.
It can be immaculate starting now. We do check the turn, so.
And they bet half pot now on the turn. So this is, an interesting size by villain. Setting up in SPR just under 1 if we call the turn. And yeah, so facing big bet. Again, I don't think that the big bet is super mergy. I think the big bet is going to be more in line with the, ace jack of clubs, ace jack of diamonds. Maybe they're straight draws, but I'm not even sure that they're straight draws bet this size because it's really easy for us to check jam and deny the equity of like a queen jack or a 7-8. So, yeah, I'm really inclined to believe that this villain is essentially polarizing and has hands that have very little equity and hands that have a ton of equity, like 9s and 10s or 9-10 suited or pocket 4s, those types of hands. And against an aggressive villain that is calling a ton and putting lots of money in the pot, I'm just going to work under the assumption that they're going to overbluff.
So that sounds like you're going to call this turn bet instead of check jam.
Definitely.
See what the wolf does. Oh, man, if you just pick the right flop c-bet size, we'd be golden right now. But...
Well, here we are. Got to make sure the ace jack of diamonds calls the flop, I guess. So river's a 5 of hearts. Final board is 4, 9, 10, 3, 5. So ace deuce, 6, 7 get there. But again, I mean 6, 7 is actually a double gut shot on the turn. So ace deuce, I guess, would be the primary fear here on the river. Villain jams and, yeah, just trivial, obvious slam dunk call.
Yeah, I think the river's the easiest street.
Yeah. They do have the 7-8, so they did put their equity at risk on the turn. Well, c'est la vie. They lose. Again, I think if we bet half here, like, we get... Flop may just get raised, honestly, if we bet half.
Yeah, I might just get it all in on the flop.
Yeah. The hero opens to 3 big blinds on the button. Small blind, 3 bets to 120. We got the kings.
Depth 2 or 150 effective to start the hands.
Yeah.
Assume another 25 big blind-ish 4-bet.
That would
be a little bit bigger.
That would be the assumption. All right. So far, so good. We've nailed it. Flop is 9, 10, 5. There's 530 in the pot. The SBR is 2. We have kings with the king of hearts. The small blind checks. Okay, I'll ask again. Do you know if this is the same wolf as hand number 1? Because
This is the same. This is the same wolf as hand number 1.
Oh man.
So are you gonna guess jam?
Yeah, I'm really thinking through the possibility here. Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Hey, we're trying to nail what you would do, not the other way around. So,
well, if it were double Broadway, I would feel more inclined to jam. The fact that it's 10-9 high, I don't know if villain has their Queen Jack suited or King Jack suited, although that doesn't really matter. Actually, you probably don't want them to have those hands, because I think Queen Jack suited just folds to a jam. I think I bet half pot. That's what I'm going to go with. Half pot.
come on, Wolf.
No. Should have just went with a quarter. It's such a safe answer, you know? Now I'm in my own head now. I it's just
how are you in your head? We're trying to play like you, not the other way around. Anyways, Wolf goes quarter, gets called.
It's all foobar now. They check, turns a 6 of spades, and I don't even care anymore what they do. It's all over. I'm just too devastated in this immaculate hand attempt that is lasting week after week after week after week after week. Okay, get it together. They called, turned to 6 of spades, 5, 6, 9, 10 is the board. There's 8, 46 in the pot. Small blind checks, presumably. Would have been nice if we would have bet half pot on the flop, because I think if we bet half, their range is going to consist of a lot more of the like pocket pairs and bluff catchers, and now they're going to have some actual foldable hands on the turn. I think I just probably just jam either way.
Just stick it in here. Try to stack 10x, 7s, 8s, jacks.
8,
that
9,
doesn't get it in pre-flop.
6, 7, all of their like
10.
pair plus draws. Jack 10 maybe.
Well, since we gave up before the turn anyways, this doesn't matter. Hero goes ahead and bets small again on the turn, setting up a really low SPR on the river, which
should have jammed the turn.
Yeah, not great. 4-liner on the river. Final board is 5, 9, 10, 6, 7. So it makes it straight. Lot of 2 pairs and 8x combos that we wouldn't be surprised to see. Everything from 7, 8 suited, pocket 8s, 8, 9 suited, 6, 7 probably getting in there too. So definitely think that there is an argument for checking back here and not value betting kings on the river.
I actually think the small line should probably jam the river.
Yeah, just do a lot of donk jamming.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that small blind, if they do have one of those super strong hands on the river, has to be concerned that we would check back a lot of our strongest hands on the turn now, given how scary the board is.
One thing that I would pay attention to here is the timing of the small blind on the river. Because presumably, given the stakes that we're playing here, the small blind is operating at a relatively high level and is probably going to consider donk jamming on the 4 straight with a lot of their top end value type hands that now aces, kings, queens aren't going to stack themselves by ripping. They got to weigh that against us having like king jack or queen jack or ace king of hearts or just ace king in general, maybe ace queen. They got to weigh donk jamming versus checking to get some bluffs out of those hands. I don't think those hands bluff on this run out at a super high clip just due to the nature of the board and kind of things shifting around. So anyway, I would pay a lot of attention to the small blind's timing here. And if the small blind kind of tanks before they check, then I would be a little bit concerned. But I'm concerned anyway.
They snap check, you're more likely to jam.
No. I don't think it has any bearing on what's going on here. I think actually, if they tanked and checked, I'd be more likely to jam, because that would indicate some kind of removal from their value, right? If they consider having a donking strategy here, when they do check, they're not they're gonna remove some of their value with that check. If they snap check, it's almost like they're just kind of checking in flow given the action, and
they're not even considering having a donking range, which means that
right.
All their 8x might just go into their snap check.
The timing to me would indicate some kind of splitting on the river. And
Interesting. Yeah. Or like the guy who tanks knows that, or probably has an inkling that donk jamming this river should be a thing. And once you know that he realizes that and he doesn't donk jam, then we can start presumably removing some value. So
right.
Maybe that's what happened here, because the small blind does check and the wolf on the button goes for what looks like a pretty thin river jam, given the run out, gets called
by queens.
One of the
queens made it really hard to stack them. They could have just
put it in pre-flop,
in pre, but they waited until they got a very favorable board where they had lots of very strong hands to bluff catch with, and then decided to bluff catch anyway. So
we're going to be looking at 2 4-bet pots from the cutoff. That's going to be the stated theme for today's episode, but the actual theme, the underlying theme, is going to be the continued search for the immaculate hands. I think we have hope today. We might go 2 for 2. Wow. I think these 2 hands actually have potential, and they're 4-bet pots, which are kind of, they could go a lot of different ways with sizing and stuff post-flop. So
all right,
let's get right into it. Pocket kings, black kings in the cutoff. Assume we're either going to be opening or 3-betting. Yep. We open to $25. We're playing 5-10. Get 3-bet by the button, and then something really strange happens. The cutoff the small blind cold calls the 3-bet. So it goes open to 25, 75 on the button, cold call 75 from the small blind. Small blind is a confirmed fish. This is also going to be a commonality between hand number 1 and hand number 2, is this weird pre-flop action happening. I guess the first question here, 4-bet size. We can already see that the wolf in question makes it 215. Is this around what you'd be making it? Would you 4-bet at all? Maybe we could start there.
I would definitely 4-bet. I would definitely 4-bet. I'd be 4-betting probably queens plus and ace king. Would be maybe some like ace 5 suited if I was feeling a little froggy. Maybe even ace queen. Like, okay, I'm going down a rabbit hole of like the hands. Probably I would probably 4-bet ace queen as well. But anyway, with that said, I would go bigger. They went the kind of normal 4-bet size, 21.5 big blinds. I would probably go like 250 or 260, maybe get on the borderline of 25 to 26 big blinds with the small blind flatting. I think that the size that the player in question chose is going to pull in the button quite often, and we're going to be taking a flop 3 ways, and then 3-way 4-bet pot going to be checking range, or it's just going to lead to some kind of odd situations where we're in the middle of 2 players. So I don't know if you can hear my cat, by the way, but it's captive in the room and desperately wants out so that it can fight with the other cats. But yeah, I would go 25 big blinds personally to try to generate some folds from the button. I don't think you're getting a ton of folds from the small blind when you 4-bet.
Yeah, I think he's here to stay, and that's a big reason to size up slightly for sure.
Button does fold, so that's nice. They can probably fold like some of their offsuit, like maybe king queen type hands to this 4-bet. Maybe even ace queen off is not the best candidate to peel, but we get
like
what
you predicted,
we wanted.
The small blind is here to stay.
Yeah, we get what we wanted. We got out the rag and small blind called, so happy day. 10, 5, 3, rainbow flop. SPRs are on 1 and small blind checks.
I would be starting out with a small c-bet here, definitely with kings, just trying to get called by pretty much everything in the small blind's range. I think when we bet small enough, it's going to be pretty tough for the small blind to find folds with most reasonable hands. I guess it kind of depends on how many hands he's peeling the 4-bet with. Maybe if he has like queen 8 of diamonds here, he can fold something like that. But basically going to bet very small, try to keep the small blind range wide and get to stacking him later. Is that what you'd be thinking here for c-bet size, or whether to even c-bet? Or
I think, again, you mentioned it from the jump that there's a lot of different things you could do. And, I'm going to ruin the immaculate hand probably from the jump. I would check behind, I think, and let villains potentially over-aggress with a hand like 7s, 8s, or 9s. I know that those hands we can get called by, but I also think that they will tend to bet the turn when the flop gets checked through because, they have ace-king, so I'm going to try to make them fold and probably use a bigger size than quarter pot. So for me, I think I just check behind and play a 2-street game, and if they double check, then I can get the money in no matter what. So I just, those queen 8 of diamond type hands that you said, if they do have those types of hands, I would really like it if they put a bet in. And I think like the thing that I'm really trying to do here is not generate any folds from villains range whatsoever. Like if they do have those wacky hands that they fold the flop with, I really don't want them to do that. And our hand is strong enough to where like, really only an ace is kind of disastrous for us. So yeah, I think I just check behind and then kind of play it from there.
I really like the part of your analysis where you said that like you think that the small blind could just way overplay some bluff catchers once we check behind you're putting us on ace king. I think the type of player that finds a cold call facing a open and a 3-bet in the small blind is completely the type of player that I could see just jamming his whole stack on the turn with pocket 7s on like a clean turn, like a deuce or a 4 or, some low card, again, thinking that that type of hand needs some protection. And it's kind of difficult to see how we win that stack from that bluff catching region if we start out by betting ourselves. So I think that there definitely is a big argument for checking back here, and also, like you said, capturing some bluffs from like the queen 8 of diamonds type hands, or just letting them turn some equity, right? Letting them turn some sort of top pair or second pair, and now they can get stacked by check calling or betting themselves.
Who knows? They could have 6-8 of diamonds. Like who knows?
Right.
I have literally no idea what they could have.
Yeah, the wolf kind of takes like a hybrid approach between your strat and my strat. So he does start out with a small c bet on the flop and gets called $90 into 515.
That's not really a hybrid. That's just betting.
Oh, you'll see. This full strat's not over yet.
All right. So they bet. I'm gonna have to change my positioning here for the YouTube audience. I'm getting invaded by my new friend, Mr. Ponzu, who's a big poker fan and just really wants to be long-time listener, wants to be part of the show. So bet a quarter, turns to 7 of spades. Villain checks. You kind of set it up. I'm guessing that the wolf is going to go ahead and check behind.
Yeah. SPR1 now, basically assuming that the wolf is thinking all the things that you were thinking on the flop, except just one street later. Hopefully we still get them to the turn with hands that need to bluff the river, especially when we bet so small on the flop. So wolf checks behind on the turn, does check a street, but happens to be a different street than the one that Brad wanted to check. We get the 10 of spades on the river, so top pair pairs on the flop. The final board is 10, 5, 3, 7, 10. Definitely not our favorite river, but still got to see what the small blind does first before freaking out.
Freaking out? We have kings. If they have a 10, they have a 10. What's the problem? Well, that's a problem. They bet half pot on the river.
Yeah. I thought if there was a spot where we might deviate from your opinion of what an immaculate hand looks like, it might be here. Is there a argument here for raising, even though it looks a little thin on the surface?
There's definitely an argument for raising.
Right. Seems like at this SPR, the small blind would pick probably all in with 10x, and
I've thought this. I've had that same thought 1,000 times and have jammed into trips or a boat or a flush many times as well. So like, I don't know that thought is 100% accurate.
Okay.
When it comes to players that cold call 3-bets from the small blind. I know what you're saying. I've had that thought a ton, and like, constantly surprised when they show up with very, very strong hands. Very similar to like a live poker concept where, spots that are very obvious that you should go big or go all in, and a player will bet like a third on the river, and you're like, I never lose. And you call, and they've got like top set, and you're like, what just happened to me?
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, I probably jam just out of the principle of the matter, but it wouldn't be surprising if they have a 10. I think they still have enough hands to call that are worse than kings.
Yeah, that's what that was my first thought too when I saw this hand, is that like, I don't think I'd be able to help myself on the river, and I'd just stick in the last 29 big blinds, hope he finds a call with jacks, or eights, or nines, or whatever weird hand he finds the double cold call with preflop. It's funny though that you said that you're regularly surprised by how often you run into the strong portion of their range that we expected would use a bigger size on the river, because it sort of feels like the wolf here felt the same thing, because he decided to call here. This is why I was worried that this is where we'd be deviating from your immaculate hand.
Well, we got pretty much 0 streets right. So your prediction that we were going to get an immaculate hand on both of them, pretty far from reality, I think.
It's weird how we got every street wrong, but this feels like we were really close to an immaculate hand still, right? Like we had the concept, the big picture, we had it down. We're like, all right, we're going to check a street. We're giving him an opportunity to bluff. Like,
what's that, Ponzu? Yeah, that's some bullshit, he said.
Well, hopefully this hand doesn't end in complete disaster where we run into a 10. Thank God it does not. We can see just how fishy the small blind is. He shows up with king 9 offsuit here, so maybe a hand that would have just put all the money in themselves if we had checked back the flop. Although maybe not, given that we saw that given an opportunity to put all the money in as a bluff, he decided to only put in half his stack.
Maybe, but it's really easy for them, if we were to check back the flop, instead of betting quarter or 20%, right? Then they can very easily use a bigger size on the turn than our 20%. Like they could bet half.
Or he might just go put in half his stack on the turn and jam the river, right?
Right, exactly. And I think this type of player would be inclined to use a bigger size than they should, which would pretty much force them to going all in on the river if they were bluffing. And like I said, they could have 6-8 suited. I have no idea. I have no idea what they have. My suspicion is that they could be exceptionally wide here. So, yeah, I think Wolf got a lot of money, but definitely wasn't an immaculate hand. And Villain somehow left with $291. I suspect that money was.
Let's just dive into it, because it just gets weird straight from the jump. I don't even think there's need for an intro. So you got kings on the button here, king of clubs, king of diamonds. That's a pretty good hand.
It is a good hand, and so whatever contagion that you caught, apparently I caught it as well, because here we are.
You gave it to me.
No. So we have it open. The villain here is a whale. To put it into context, they're a white belt, and like a brand new white belt too, who hasn't even gotten their belt yet. So they open to $30. They get 3-bet by a reg to $90. I have kings on the button. The reg has about, they start the hand with about 1,400, and I have them covered. The white belt starts with, about 1,100-ish. So we're at first this decision point where I have 2 kings on the button. It's 3-bet before my action, relatively deep with the reg, and we certainly want to keep the whale in the mix here. So this is what the contagion that I caught was, that I did not want to 4-bet and isolate myself against the reg in a spot where I probably have very, very few low equity 4-bets. And also, I just wanted very greedily to keep the white belt in the mix. So I decided to do something that on the surface looks a little bit wacky. I cold flat the button with kings. I think in a perfect world, right? Maybe the white belt can 4-bet pre, even though that's going to happen at quite low frequency. But yeah, just doing whatever I can to keep my man in the pot. So I cold call the 90, the blinds fold, and my man stays in the pot. They call the 3-bet. fair word of warning, it's not like a lock that they just fold if I cold 4-bet either, right? Like they could still call pre facing a cold 4-bet. So yeah, I'm not sure. I still don't even really know how to feel about this hand. So there's 285 in the middle.
I understand like the point though. I mean, I think the way that I think about it is that the whale is likely to make, humongous mistakes somewhere post flop, and the reg in between you and the whale is not likely to make humongous mistakes post flop. And so there's like you said, there's like huge value in keeping the whale in the hand, doing everything you can to make sure that they get to see future streets where they're likely to make future mistakes and give you an opportunity to capitalize on that with kings. And yeah, I think it's probably pretty close to, it's too close to judge as to whether it's better to 4-bet this hand or higher EV to keep the guy who's going to maybe make like a, 100 big blind punt somewhere down the line.
Yeah, man, I'm going to say something like even more, I guess, more hot take. It's impossible to be able to discern which one is better. It is impossible. There's too many variables to be able to discern whether cold 4 or cold flat is better. The riskier when it's cold flatting, right? But just because hardly anybody does it. It's outside the box. So with that said, we take a flop 3 ways. There's 285 in the middle. The flop is Jack 8-5 with the Jack of diamonds, 8 of spades, 5 of spades. Pretty good for kings. I've seen much worse. The white belt goes ahead and checks. The reg bets a third. And, this is a spot where, I don't expect the reg to be range c-betting. I do expect this bet to be equity driven. And, multi-way here, I don't really think I'm going to have a raising range, especially with the white belt. We still have the same dynamic in play pre-flop, where if I raise the reg, then that kind of forces the white belt out. So yeah, just going to be flatting here with pretty much my entire range. I have to imagine if I flop a set of jacks, I'm almost certainly just flatting here as well. Have flush draws are flatting, etc. So I call the third, $92. And we get everything that we could have possibly wished for. The white belt just puts in $1,000. So they just jam on Jack 8-5, and I'm thinking, oh baby, this is what we came for. And then a few seconds later, much to my horror, we get something else. The reg jams their 1,300 over the whale. So yeah,
no tank. It just took him a few seconds. He was just like, yep. $1,000.
Not much thinking before they ripped. So I got everything that I asked for and a little bit more, I think. But I don't think, realistically speaking, that folding kings is an option as played. I think that I have no idea what the white belt could be jamming. They could be jamming just top pair we kicker, and who knows what else. I think the reg can certainly be jamming queens as well as ace jack. So, and some flush draws too, right? Some nut flush draws, I think, are totally in their jamming range. So I don't think there's really anything major to discuss here. I think I just have to call. I don't have the king of spades, but even if I did have the king of spades, I don't think it would influence whether or not I called or folded. So yeah, I go ahead, put the money in, and turn is an ace of clubs.
That's not the turn that I wanted to see.
Not the greatest of turns. So much for ace jack and the nut flush draw. The river's a 9. So the white belt had the ace 8 of diamonds, so they jammed second pair and just ginned the turn. And the reg had the jack 10 of spades, so they flopped top pair with a flush draw. So yeah, I actually like the reg side of this better than both me and the white belt, but it was the reg that ultimately came out buried in this situation.
Came up empty-handed. Yeah. So the final run out is ace 9, no spades.
Yep. And the white belt had ace 8. They jammed middle pair. Top kicker, to be fair.
Backdoor flush draw.
Backdoor flush draw. I mean, basically had the world and they got there. So that's my attempt at cold calling a 3-bet. Let's see if John fared any better than myself.
This is Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson. Coach Brad approved.